You can be seated, please. Thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you for volunteering. No, forget that. Thank you for coming tonight. Sorry. Okay, you gotta remember it's 9:15 my time, so you think you're tired. I'm really tired, okay? So I wanna thank the Reich family for hosting this, and I appreciate that, the chance to talk. One thing I want you to understand what I'm doing tonight is I'm talking about the Army. Nothing I say has anything to do with the Air Force. Okay, so just keep that in mind, all right? So I'm going to talk about a study that came out in February of 2015. Have you read it? Good, because you know what this is about if you say you did. Okay, it's about lying, so don't. All right, so I'm going to blast through the study, but I'm also going to talk about the reaction to this study. And this study, like I said, came out in February of 2015, but it really started over a decade before. And what happened was the Chief of Staff of the Army came to the Army War College, and he said, I think we have a problem in our junior officers, our 03 captains. And he said that they're not being very creative. They're not being very independent. They're not being allowed to make their own decisions. He thinks, I think we're telling them too much what to do and how to do it. They don't get freedom to try something themselves. And he says, I think the problem is we have so many requirements we put on them that we've crowded out all the white space on their calendars. We've filled their calendars so much they can't think on their own. And he says, I want to get a handle on that. So he came to the Army War College, and I got the tasker. He said, I want to know every single requirement that we put on company commanders, captains. And he says, I want you to tally all that up, and we're going to try to take away some. So they gave me 10 War College students who, instead of their massive research paper, I sent them around the world to collect up every single requirement known to mankind. They got over a lot on me, because I sent 3 to Korea, and I think they played golf on one day, they went shopping on another day, and then one day they collected requirements. But still, I collected requirements for every single thing and tallied them all up, tried to figure out how many hours it added up to, and actually tallied up how many days it added up to. And what these students came up with was company commanders somehow have to fit 297 days of mandatory training requirements into 256 available training days. And so we had to tell the chief, this is what's going on in the Army. We have a culture where we love to create requirements for those below us. Now that's well-intentioned, because what we're trying to do is save them time, to save them the heartache of trying to do it themselves and failing. So we do it for them, and we tell them how to do it. We also know what's good for them, and so we teach them how to do it. That's what's sucking up all the time, Chief. We have a culture that does that. So that got put out in a study called Stifling Innovation. And I put that away. It's on the bookshelf. But since then, there's always been something in the back of my mind, something always sitting in the back of my mind saying, okay, let me get this straight. They have 297 days of mandatory training requirements. If you add it all up, you only have 256 days to do it. It's physically, literally, humanly impossible to do all the training in the allocated time. What are they reporting? What are they reporting? So I decided to do this study on this, and I said, you know what I'll do? I'll go around the Army and I'll talk to pockets of officers. So I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I can get infantry and armored officers, and I did little focus groups full of captains. I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, where I could work with logistics captains, and I talked to focus groups of captains there. I went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where I had little groups of majors, and I could ask them questions. And I went to the Army War College, where we have colonels and lieutenant colonels, and I could ask them questions. I also went to the Pentagon and talked to people there. And so what I do is I get a group of about 8 officers in the room, and they were told, someone wants to come talk to you from the War College about requirements and training requirements. And so we would get together and I'd say, what do you think about training requirements? And they'd say, oh, there's too many. And we'd all just start, it's a lot of fun complaining together with Army people. And we just say, oh, this is ridiculous. You know, I got to do this and I got to do this. And we have Constitution Day training. That's a real requirement we have on us. We have to do you guys have to do that? Okay, so that's one of those kind I can really complain about, Constitution Day training. And can you believe this? Can you believe this? And everyone would just really have a good time complaining. And then right about the right moment, I'd say, so if it's impossible to do all this training in the amount of time we have, what are you guys reporting? And right then, what do you think happened? Total silence. Because what was I doing? Now, one thing I want to say is, I usually don't get to any questions at the end because I forget what I said. okay? So if you have questions, and I'm serious, or if you want to interact, do it now, okay? Because we probably won't have any time for it at the end. So if you have a question, you disagree, you don't understand, if I talk too fast, just stop it right now, okay? So total silence when I hit that point. Well, why would there be total silence? Well, one thing you don't do to someone in uniform is ask them if they lie. You just don't do that. Why not? Well, people in the Army, 93% of the people in the Army say that their values match the Army values of loyalty, duty, respect, integrity, honor. So they think, we think, I say we, I'm not part of the uniform profession anymore, but it sounds better than me saying they or you, so I say we, okay? But we think that we are above the average station in life, that we are more morally sound than society. But also society tells us that we are above average. If you look at who society trusts, which leaders of which institutions in the United States they trust, 55% of Americans say they trust the leaders of the military institution. That's the highest of any institution in the US. Now, at first I didn't think 55% was that high, but it's the highest, and you contrast that with Congress and Wall Street, who have 6 and 7%, then you realize the military is really good, okay? So society tells us that you guys are honest, we could trust you. We tell ourselves that we're honest, you could trust us. And some guy from the War College just walked in and said, so do you guys lie? And it was total silence. Well, what I'd do is I'd start probing a little bit more, and I'd start asking them questions, and I'd start asking them details, and I'd get comments like, well, first I got, nobody was ever asked to report something as true that was not. Or I've never given a false report. Never intentionally have I said, yes, we're 100% on this when I knew we weren't. But I kept probing, and I get comments then would start popping out like, well, you find ways to qualify your answer. It's not quibbling, it's assuming risk. Or we met the intent, or we got creative, or you gotta make priorities. And then I'd probe a little deeper, and I'd heard words like fudging, or checking the box, or pencil whipping, or hand waving. Finally, after about 20 minutes, someone would put their hands on their head and say, okay, fine, we lie. And right then, we had a different conversation. That's a really hard thing to get to, is that point, where people have to admit, okay, fine, we lie. Well, what do I mean lying? What do I mean lying? Well, I started with mandatory training requirements. And in the Army, a lot of examples of lying about mandatory training requirements come about when a unit gets ready to deploy. And when a unit gets ready to deploy, they get all trained up, but right about towards the end, they'll send everyone on block leave. Everyone gets 30 days. And then when you come back, we'll have about a month of training, and then we'll ship out to either Iraq or Afghanistan. And so they said, well, you know, once they came back from block leave, there was a lot of training to do. And the way they did it was, well, as one person told me, in their unit, the way they covered all the mandatory training at the end was you'd pick the smartest dude, and he would go and take the mandatory training 9 times with his CAC for other members of his squad, and then that way they all had a certificate to prove that they'd completed it. Now, when I read that to you, what goes through your mind? That's ridiculous? What's that? Buy that guy a beer? Okay. This hurts. Okay, it hurts to hear that. Okay, but you talk to someone in the Army and they say, yeah, I hate to say it, but I know what you're talking about. When I wrote this report, I was worried that maybe it's off base. Maybe I should send it out to somebody to make sure it's on target. I sent it to an 05 in Germany who I knew, and I said, hey, just look this over and see if I'm on target. And he writes back an email saying, you won't believe this, but as I'm reading your report, my NCOIC slides a roster right beside it and says, sign here. Because what was he doing? What were they having in the next room? Mandatory training, and he wanted him to sign it while he was sitting in his office so they could say that he attended the training and they still get credit for him. And so he said he had a nice conversation with his NCOIC, and they laughed about how he's reading a report about how people lie about mandatory training, and it just goes on in the Army as something normal. Is this disturbing? Yeah, it's disturbing, okay? This is the way real life is, unfortunately, okay? And so But it's not just mandatory training. Mandatory training is easy to pick on, but it surrounds us in the Army. There's many other examples, and they're not just trivial. Here's an example that's not trivial, and it happens downrange, and that is after every incident that happens in the Army, you have to complete something called a storyboard. A storyboard is a PowerPoint presentation. It has text in it, has pictures in it, has maps in it, and it has a narrative of what happened during an incident. Well, a lot of units said you have to turn in a storyboard, no matter what happened. And so I had officers tell me I could spend time working on this thing, or I could spend time getting ready for the next patrol. So they would either just copy and paste from old storyboards, or they just make stuff up and turn it in. And that's a storyboard. That's a surprise, okay? But it's not just those things, it's also the trivial things, the administrative things. In the Army, when we want to go on leave, we have to turn in something called a Department of the Army Form 31, request for leave. But accompanying that, you have to get on the computer and fill out this thing called Travel Risk Prevention System. Anyone ever see one of these? Some people have seen it. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, okay? Well, what it is, what TRIPS does, it says, well, say you're going to drive to Indianapolis, and you say, okay, I'm going to drive to Indianapolis. How are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to drive 10 hours. I'm going to roll the window down so I get nice cold air. I'm going to turn up the radio. I'm going to sing loud and have a monster sitting right there. You put that in TRIPS, and what will TRIPS say? No. It'll say, how far will you drive? And you'll have to write in 2 hours. How often will you stop? Okay, every 2 hours. I'll get a full night's sleep. I won't take any prescription medicines. I'll do this, I'll do that. I'll have my mother-in-law in the back seat talking to me the whole time. You know, you promise. You put in whatever TRIPS wants to hear so you can turn that in with your leave form, because you have to if you want to go on leave. And so thousands of these things are turned in with leave forms, and it's very, very seldom that people tell the truth because they want to go on leave. So that's an example of lying, but it's not the storyboard, it's not mandatory training, it's just this little administrative thing. Here's another thing that reflects an example of the lying that goes on, and that is in the Army we have officer evaluation reports. You guys have OPRs, I guess. And I don't want to talk about what was written in them, because that's a lot of fiction in there, but we don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about, this is a support form. This accompanies the rating. And what that's supposed to show is I was counseled at the beginning about what my objectives were to do, but also I was counseled, does anyone know this? Quarterly counseling. So a total of 4 times I was counseled on how I was doing. It's really hard to do those 4 counseling sessions, okay? So you go to turn in your completed officer evaluation report, and the clerk or the sergeant major who's collecting them, you turn it in to them, and they say, well, where are your counseling dates? And you say, I didn't get to do them. They're in Nevada, and we're here. I couldn't get to them. And so then the clerk or the sergeant major would say, where are your counseling dates? And so you say, I didn't do them. And they say, where are your counseling dates? So what happens is you go in the other room, and you agonize. What do you agonize over? Does anyone know?
What dates you are about.
What dates? What do you agonize over about the dates?
When can you lie that you were there?
You can't say it was a weekend, because that would be unbelievable. And so people get out the calendar, they say, okay, most people don't counsel on Mondays, Fridays are bad, I'll pick a Tuesday. So they pick a Tuesday, put it in, and they fill in their dates that way. And then what goes right beside those dates?
Signature.
Your signature. How much time goes into that? Nothing, just like that. So what I'm trying to point out is that we tell lies and we don't even call them lies. How can we call them, what do we call them if we don't even call them lies? That sounds like lying. Well, what happens in organizations is something called ethical fading. What happens with ethical fading is when you take the obvious black and white of right and wrong, and you take that ethical spotlight and you move that ethical spotlight off and you fade it out. So you say to yourself, it's not a lie anymore. It's not right or wrong. It's a decision. It's a business decision. It's the way we do business here in the Army. So how do you ethically fade things so we can convince ourselves it's not a lie? Well, the first thing that we do is that we don't use the word lie. we use euphemisms like pencil whipping, checking the box, giving them what they want, prioritizing, or like one person told me, no, it's not lying, it's good leadership. Okay, but that allows us to live with ourselves, that I didn't lie. Okay, the next way that you ethically fade it so we don't think it's a lie is you numb them to death. Okay, you numb them to death. So what this is every year to get on my computer, I have to fill out something called the information assurance statement. And it says, I have read and understand the above requirements concerning use of Army access systems. 1,800 words. Do you think I've ever read that? No. But I always say, I have read and understand. Now, if it just said, I agree, fine, okay? I wouldn't be lying. But the Army likes to see, I have read and understand, and what do? I jam my CAC in there and digitally sign it, okay? Because I'm so numb to it. Because they ask me so many things that I say, go ahead, yes, whatever, yes. In England, they did an experiment. They wanted to see people's reactions to public Wi-Fi. In Europe, they got a lot more public Wi-Fi. And so for free public Wi-Fi, they opened up a free public Wi-Fi site. Splash page comes up. First thing that said was, in exchange for this free public Wi-Fi, I promise to give my firstborn child. How many people do you think agreed with that? All of them. They had to shut the experiment down. They said, this is getting out of control. I think we're going to get in trouble with this, okay? But people are so numb, okay, to giving away our signature, to giving away our honor, to giving away our initials, our word, that we start forgetting what our signature, our word, and our initials are. And so we don't call it a lie anymore. We call it business. It's just a decision, but it's not a lie. That's what starts to happen with ethical fading. Another way you can ethically fade it is, well, if I asked any of you face-to-face a question, I know you'd tell me the truth. But if I give you some distance to something that you don't want to tell the truth on, that allows you to do it and not call it a lie. What do I mean by that? Well, the CAC, you guys call it CAC, right? The CAC card allows us to do that. Because we don't have to say something, we don't have to write something, we just jam that piece of plastic in there, and that gives us some distance to say, yes, you need to sign this when you clear a post. I have been briefed on the sponsorship program. I was never briefed on the sponsorship program, okay? But you jam that piece of plastic in there, and it allows you to clear a post. Or this gives us distance. In other words, briefing charts with colors allows me to say, we're green on suicide prevention, as opposed to someone looking me straight in the face and saying, all your people attended suicide prevention training. No one was absent, no one was in the hospital, no one was TDY. You really had 100%. It's easier for me to say, we're green on suicide prevention. That gives me some distance. So that's the way you ethically fade decisions, to allow us to lie without feeling the guilt of a lie. But every once in a while, we have to tell a lie. And we sort of know it's going to be a lie. And the reason that we say, no, it's going to be a lie, but I have to lie in this situation because, and the number one reason in the Army that we lie about something is because that requirement for information, that requirement to do something is dumb. Dumb requirements deserve to be lied to. We say to ourselves, there's something wrong in the world and someone needs to straighten out the justice. And so this is one of those dumbest requirements. Someone needs to lie to it, and so we lie to it. It balances the scales of justice again. And so we convince ourselves, if it's dumb, you could lie to it. We convince ourselves, if it's the staff asking us the questions, you don't have to give them the accurate answer, but if it's the commander, you can give them the accurate answer. So we start saying, whether I tell the truth or not depends on what we think of the worthiness of who's asking or what they're asking. So here's an example of someone who, they're talking about combat, and they're talking about reports, and they say, you can ask anybody in this room the purpose of declaring a troops in contact or a casualty evacuation. We definitely know why we do that stuff and why we're reporting that stuff on the radio. And people jump. They're timely, they're accurate. But then this person adds, but some of this stuff is, you need this for why? Show me in the reports guide that this is actually a required report. Because right now it just seems like you're wasting a unit leader's time. So in this person's mind, they said, yeah, I'll tell the truth on all the important stuff, but if it's dumb, you're just wasting my time, and it's not worth me telling you the truth. Do I have any reactions yet? We're going to be finished real quick, so that's good. All right, no reactions yet.
Sir,
Yes?
how do leadership reply to a comment like that about requirements being dumb? It seems like that would be a problem that you could fix.
Yeah, why do you allow dumb requirements? Rats. Normally I turn it around and ask, so could someone answer that? But I don't think anyone here is going to answer that. Why do we allow dumb requirements? Because not everyone thinks it's dumb. Someone said, let's make them give reports. Okay, and they think it's important. But you're saying, I understand troops in contact, casualty evacuation, that's important, but how many gas masks we have in Iraq, I don't need to worry about that right now. Okay, just tell them 24. Okay, so you ask a dumb question, I'm going to give a dumb answer back. But the people who asked that question in the first place, they don't think it's dumb. We can't look for evil people here. Everyone, the person who came up with that requirement thinks it's a good one. Yes?
Sir, I think by the same token, you're saying that, on the mattress it says, don't swallow the mattress. It's probably because somebody did it at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Don't swallow, yeah. Yeah, because someone said, I heard of somebody swallowing a mattress, maybe we should put that all out there. Right, does someone have something here?
Sir, don't you think if you go back to the original point, though, about giving this discretion to lower-level commands?
Yes?
And then that would make it to where we're not incentivizing people to lie. Say that captain had the discretion to send one POC to become a subject matter expert and come back and teach the unit. Now he's used his time effectively instead of doing it exactly the way that training told him to.
So part of mass producing, you're saying, why don't we tailor it to people instead of mass producing it for the,
Right.
for every, yeah, well, yeah, you're jumping to, why don't we just do that? Okay, but we live in an organization that has an uneasy balance between a profession and a bureaucracy. A bureaucracy likes the rules. A bureaucracy likes the systems and the processes. The profession, what does the profession rely on? Leaders, okay? And when you swing it too far to the bureaucracy, we get this kind of stuff, okay? We also lie when we know it's lying because we convince ourselves, well, it's not for me. It's for the mission or it's for the troops. Here's the response of a Marine captain that was in one of the groups, and he talks about when an IED went off. There was 2 lieutenants that were doing a relief in place. IED goes off, both lieutenants are injured. So he says, I falsified the traumatic brain injury report that changed the distance from the IED strike to where one person was standing. So that way someone didn't come back down and stick a finger in my CO's chest and say, you need to evac that lieutenant right now. If I do that, I'm going to get my boys in bags because they don't have any leadership. That ain't happening. I owe the parents of this country more than that. So in this officer's mind, they falsified the distance to the IED because they wanted to keep the leadership in the unit. What do you think? Did it help the unit? Who did it hurt? Go ahead.
The lieutenants were injured?
Yeah. There's some lieutenant walking around with traumatic brain injury that was never taken care of.
Not make good decisions for his troops then?
Yeah, I mean, but in this person's mind, this is why they told the lie. Okay? Because the troops needed a leader. Okay? So they knew he's lying, but he said, I justified it because it wasn't for me. And decisions, the lies that I make that aren't for me, they're sort of acceptable. So right about now, you should be asking, so what? So what? Okay, maybe this is the way the Army's always been. Maybe this is the way the Army's always will be. And it looks like the Army is like operating okay now. And if you're describing this, maybe there's nothing wrong with the way the Army's operating. And so I have to say to that, okay, fine, that may be true, but I want to point out 5 things that are wrong if we leave things the way they are. 5 things about the status quo that is unacceptable. The first thing is, if we leave things the way they are, every individual gets to decide what's right and wrong. So for example, when I show the storyboard example, there are some Army officers that sit there and say, yeah, I tell you what, we knew people that falsified storyboards all the time. Other people sit there and say, you falsified storyboards? Are you kidding? That's real intelligence. You don't falsify a storyboard. But see, our status quo right now allows individuals to decide what's acceptable to lie about. Because we don't talk about this, everyone gets to decide. So in some units, if you have a negligent discharge, your weapon goes off in the barrel, okay? And because they didn't clear it correctly, that requires an automatic investigation. Other units don't report it because it was just a harmless mistake, it'll never happen again. Everyone gets to decide what's right and wrong, what you lie about and what you don't lie about, if we leave things the way they are. The next problem is, if we continue to lie about things and don't do anything about it, everything becomes suspect. You can't trust anything. And so when someone gets asked how many non-tactical vehicles do the Afghans have, and they are told one number, and then they turn around and say, no, here's another number, or here's another number, we say, well, what can you trust? We can't trust anything. If we leave things the way they are, not only does everyone get to decide where to draw the line, but you can't trust anything because you don't know what's trivial and what's not. Another reason why we can't leave things the way they are is because it hides careerism. Whether we like it or not, we are all competitive. And we're forcing people to make a decision if they want to be the one person that tells the truth while everyone else is giving perfection. And so if you go to a meeting and everyone says, so how are you doing on human trafficking training? And 1, 2, 3 say 100%, 100%, 100%. Well, the next person, they might be saying 100% because they want to look better, or they might be saying 100% because everyone else is doing it, or they might be saying 100% because they did better training than that and they have to lie about it. But we can't tell the difference between someone who's lying for the troops, someone who's lying to look better. It hides careerism. Someone who wants to get ahead, it hides them. But another reason why we can't leave things the way they are is because what we do is we teach young leaders how to be hypocrites. What do I mean by that? What happens is at a very early age, people learn how to talk one way and how to act another. So what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times to come into the Army or to come into other organizations, you have to fill out some questions before you come in. And a lot of times some of the questions on there say things like, have you ever tried drugs? Some people say, yes, I experimented once. And if you go to the military entrance processing places, I've had people say that what happens is you put down, yes, I experimented once, they slip it around, they hand it in. The sergeant says, question 4, you might want to reconsider. So right then, they hand it back to them, they look at it, and they say, you might want to change that answer. Right then, they learn, so this is the way it works. That you say one thing, integrity, honor, and you do another. I learned it very early in my career in the Army. When I was a brand new second lieutenant, they got us all in a big auditorium, and we're going to take our Army physical. And so all the doctors in the front of the room, about 100 in the auditorium sitting down, and we're filling out the paperwork. They said, okay, block 1, write your last name. Okay, block 2, first name. Block 3, social security number. We get down to block 12, and it says, state your current physical condition. They say, block 12, right, I am in excellent physical condition. I write, I am in excellent physical condition. For an entire career in the Army, what did I write in block 12? I am in excellent physical condition. Until one day I said, wait a minute, I'm not in excellent physical condition. Why do I keep writing that? Because they told me to say it, they told me to write it, and I signed that thing. Which physical did I say, I'm telling the truth? My retirement physical. Okay, I said, my ears hurt, my knees hurt, my everything, okay. I said, why? But I had been trained to tell them what they wanted to hear on that form for an entire career. Because I thought that's what you're supposed to put on there. It never dawned on me, no, really write down what kind of condition you're in. I thought the answer was, I'm in excellent physical condition. Okay, but another problem with leaving things the way they are is not just that individuals get to decide where to draw the line, that all things become suspect, that it hides careerism, that it develops hypocrites, but we are a profession. And professions do several things. First of all, professions are experts. Professions are good at what they do. Society looks at us and they say, you better be good at waging war. Second thing professions do is they earn society's trust. So society looks at us and say, you say you're good at waging war, we trust you that you're waging war. The other thing we do is develop our own leaders. We don't bring them in from the outside and say, well, get me some more leaders for the military. No, we have to create our own. But the fourth thing that we do is when professions have problems, what do you think happens? They fix it themselves, okay? So if we leave things the way they are, we run the risk of having someone else fixing it for us. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, like when physicians have problems within their profession, who steps in? No. When physicians have problems, what organization steps in? The American Medical Association steps in and says, we need to do something. When lawyers have problems within their profession, the American Bar Association steps in. When the military has problems, yeah, who steps in? Yeah, does Congress want to step? Do you think I'd ever get an email like this that says, hi Lenny, I recently read an article about the burdensome mandatory training requirements. As a current legislative staffer, I figured I could actually help provide a solution. Are you ever in Washington? Could we schedule to talk on the phone? Do you have a list of all the units' annual training? Maybe we can come up with some courses of action to eliminate some. Your friend. Thanks a lot. Do you think I'd really get an email like that? Yeah, I did in March. Congressional staffer saying, you guys got a problem with lying? We can help. About 3 weeks ago, I got contacted by the GAO. We can help. And that's when I said, maybe I shouldn't have written this report. Okay? Because we don't need their help. Professions police themselves. If we leave things the way they are, if we don't do anything about it, if we just accept it the way it is, somebody else will step in and say, we'll fix your profession for you, because you're showing that you can't fix it yourself. So that's why we can't leave things the way they are, because a lot of people say, just leave it alone. Just don't talk about it. All right? So the report had 3 recommendations. The first recommendation, you have to acknowledge the problem. We have to admit that sometimes we are forced to lie. What does that mean? Well, to come here, I have to go on TDY, temporary duty. And to go on temporary duty, I have to go into something called the Defense Travel System, DTS. You know what I'm talking about? And in DTS, before I can come here, it asks me what? Does anyone know? Can you do this by video teleconference? Could I do this by video teleconference? Yeah, I could. What did I tell it? Yeah. See, they used to have this big long sentence that you had to write in there. And I said, I'm not writing that anymore. And then I switched it to VTC would not be advantageous. Then I said, VTC is not effective. Well, I'm not to the stage yet, but I think on the next one I'm going to put, yeah, I could, but so what, I'm not, you know, or something like that. But sometimes we have to admit that we sometimes are forced to lie, but we don't even call it lying. I signed that DTS. You go TDY, you sign that DTS, okay? You sign it. If you lied on it, you lied on it. You don't call it anything else, you're forced to lie on it. We have to admit it. We have to admit it, okay? That's the first thing. We have to acknowledge the problem. Now, there's one subpopulation of the Army that finds it really hard to acknowledge this problem. What subpopulation do you think that is? Senior officers. Senior officers. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just have one question with that. Like, as cadets, we have an honor code.
Do you?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Okay.
And if we lie, we're subject to
Yep.
getting kicked out. So how do we balance acknowledging that we lie with also not wanting to get kicked out of the military?
Next question. I don't know the answer to that. Hopefully you are not in an environment where you're forced to lie. You chuckle though, right? I mean, what kind of answer do I have for that? What we don't want you to do is think, oh, the Air Force Academy, that was the fake world. Now when I go into the Air Force, that's the real world, where everything I learned back there, just talk about when you go to reunions. But over here, this is the way the real Air Force works. We don't want that. That means you're a hypocrite, okay? But we don't want to create an environment where you walk in as a brand new second lieutenant and you're forced to lie. You say, what's up with this? Okay? But thank goodness this all happens only in the Army, so you don't have to confront that, okay? So I don't have an answer to that. I don't have an answer to that. Because we're not going to tell you, well, you guys get, just like, you know, you get how many weekends per semester? You get 3 lies per semester. You can steal twice. You know, we're not going to tell you that. All right? So acknowledge the problem. If you pretend it's never happening, we'll never deal with this. Okay? But it's really hard for senior officers to acknowledge it. Why? Well, because they defend the profession. Someone has to be the stewards of the profession. The senior officers do that. Senior officers also don't have to walk through the mire that us lowlife have to walk through. They don't have to sit through Constitution Day training. They don't have to sit through fetal alcohol distress syndrome training. They don't have to sit through human trafficking training. Okay? When they want to go on leave, they turn to someone and say, put me on leave. Okay, they don't have to do trips. So they don't know what we're talking about when I say, oh, this burden that we're putting on people, we incentivize lying. They don't know what I'm talking about. But also, what am I saying about this system and those senior officers? They grew up in this system. They succeeded in this system. And so the last thing you want to acknowledge is, yeah, I hear you, but I did it, and I'm where I am today. No one wants to say that, okay? So it's really hard for senior officers to acknowledge the problem because it hurts, because they might not have experience with all the things I'm talking about also. The second step is someone needs to exercise restraint. Someone needs to say, you know what? I know electronic cigarettes are a plague on this country, but we don't need an hour-long block of computer-based training on electronic cigarettes, okay? Or whatever the next fad is, we don't need another block of instruction on it. Because how many things do we take off the training plate? We never take anything off. We're like a compulsive hoarder. Just add more, and just push it over here, and we just keep adding more and more. So someone needs to exercise restraint. Don't look at the Pentagon. Every staff loves to create requirements. And not just training requirements, but administrative requirements. Count this, request for information, tell me this, okay? You ask a dumb question, what are you gonna get back? Dumb answer, which is code word for a lie, okay? But the final things that the report recommends is, and you should read the report, not because I wrote it, but it's because it's only 34 pages, and it's easy read, and discuss it with somebody, okay? The third thing is, somebody needs to lead truthfully. Somebody needs to lead truthfully. Now, because we're enveloped in this culture, you have to do this wisely. So what does that mean? It means in the Army, it means if you go to a command and staff meeting as a captain, and you're sitting there with 5 company commanders and the battalion commander there, and everyone says, how are we doing on human trafficking? You got 100%, 100%, 100%, and you say, I'm telling the truth, 78%. Okay, that's not gonna work, okay? What'll work is if you, right before the meeting, you go in with the fellow company commanders and say, look, we're gonna go in there, and we're gonna tell the truth on this. We're gonna tell the truth on this. She'll never take the truth on this, so we'll lie on this one still. But we'll tell the truth on this, and we'll tell the truth on this. And as 5 of you go in there and say, we're gonna tell the truth. And then when the battalion commander says, whoa, where did all this come from? Suddenly everyone's telling the truth. Then the burden is on them to say, so do you want lies? Do you want us to lie to you like we always used to? We're not gonna do that anymore. We're gonna try to tell the truth. Except on this one thing that you won't budge on, but okay. So like at the Army War College, there's a requirement for when professors want to go to an academic conference, we have to ask, well, what happened was the GSA had these wonderful conferences in Las Vegas. And so they cramped down on everything and said, you need permission. The Army War College, we have to get permission from the J7 Joint Staff. And we have to tell them it's mission essential that these people want to go to an academic conference. So we had 2 people who want to go to an academic conference. Our provost, that's the second in command at the Army War College, has to send an email to the J7 saying it's mission critical that they go. Okay, can they go to this academic conference? It's mission critical. So our provost gets an email ready because 2 of these guys want to go. He starts preparing it, but then he says, you know what? I got 2 people that want to go to an academic conference. It's really important for their professional development. But he tells the J7, but I'm not going to lie to you because we just had this study came out that says we shouldn't be forced to lie. So I'm going to tell you the truth. They need to go to this academic conference for their professional development, but the Army War College will continue to operate if they don't. It's not mission critical. So he says, can they go to this conference? It's not mission critical. Sends that off to the J7. What do you think the J7's response was? The response was, I'm a retired Marine colonel. I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't have this problem. Okay. The second thing was, I'm going to Quantico on Thursday to brief them on this because they sort of do have this problem, okay? But the second thing he asked was, is it mission critical? Provost sends an email back saying what? Yes, mission critical, okay? The provost tried to lead truthfully. But what he did was important. He shifted it over to them and said, I'm going to tell you the truth. And what was their response? Lie to me. So he says, okay, you wanted me to lie to you. I just told you the truth. Now I'll lie to you. It's mission critical. A month after that, a message comes down and says you no longer have to say mission critical. And then about 3 months after that, they said, don't send us emails anymore. Okay, you can decide at the Army War College whether you want to go or not. But see, what it took was someone to lead truthfully, someone to point out, you're making me lie. Because no one sends you an email saying, can these guys go and it's not mission critical? Because we know you'll say no. So why do we even do that? Why do you force us to lie to you? Someone needs to start leading truthfully. So that's what the study said. It came out in the middle of February in 2015. Now, the way I distributed it was I just posted it online, but I'm not stupid. So before I posted it online, I sent it to the Office of the Chief of Staff of the Army. I sent it to the Office of the Chief of Public Affairs for the Army, and I sent it to the Office of Legislative Liaison for the Army. And what response did I get back? I got nothing back, which was a green light for me. So I said, yeah, okay. And so I said, hey, they had 2 weeks to look at it. I didn't get anything back. So in the middle of February, I posted it. And I want to talk about the reaction to what the study was. I just posted it online the very next day. It hits the Washington Post. Lying in the military is common, Army War College study says. Then it hits CNN. Study says, U.S. Army officers lie routinely. It's Time magazine. Then we have Army Times report. Army officers admit to and defend their lying. Army Times actually had a very comprehensive article. The funny thing is about the Army Times is the picture they use. So then I started getting cards and letters in from people and their reaction. Now, I'm at the age now where all of my peers, okay, because I'm an old geezer, all of my peers are either gone or they're senior leaders in the Army. And so here's an email from one of the senior leaders in the Army who sends me an email and he says, and I break this into 3 phases, okay? So the first phase is the initial reaction. He sends me an email, says, okay, it's to me, subject line, study published, researchers conclude that lying in the Army is common. And he says, Lenny, really? And then he writes, just how twisted is the media take on your research? What does that say about this guy? He never read it. What did he get his information from? The headlines and an article in the Washington Post. What do you think my response was? Read it. It's only 34 pages, and each page only has about a paragraph and a half. We purposely print them on these little booklet sizes that fit on the toilet paper holders in the Pentagon. You could handle that, okay? So that the initial reaction, though, from senior leaders was this. It was based on the headlines. Army officers lie. If you're a senior leader and you read a headline that says, study comes out saying Army officers lie, what's your reaction going to be?
I didn't lie.
Yeah, it's going to be anger. You're hurting our profession. It's another guy trying to make a name for himself. Okay, so I went around at this time briefing general officers, and I got this. You know, they just look at me like this, and then they'd start telling me about the times they told the truth. You know, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I did this, and I did this. And after a while, I just like, this isn't going anywhere. They'd say, I question your methodology. What methodology? I went and talked to people. I didn't do a survey or anything. Or, you know, this really isn't a good time for this report to come out. When is a good time for a report to come out about lying, okay? So the initial phase from the senior leaders was, hey, this is not good. You are attacking the profession. But at the same time, I could see other signals of the reception in the first phase. This is something from Doctrine Man. Anyone ever hear of Doctrine Man? Okay, it's what the rest of the force looks at. It's on Facebook. Here you can see they featured the whole thing from the Washington Post article. And in here you can see one of the comments is, in other news, water is wet. What does that mean? They're saying, what? Duh, you make a living writing these studies? Are you kidding me? It's an open secret. So here, imagine me. I get feedback from senior officers saying, how could you? And then I get feedback from the rest of the force saying, why did you? Everyone knows this. Okay? So when I look at it, I saw it this way. I saw a split. I saw post-06 commanders, okay, that way, and then I saw the rest of the force this way. And these people think, we live this. We know exactly what you're talking about. No kidding. But on this side, I hear, not so fast there, youngster. Slow down. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let's not put the profession down too quickly. Okay? But I can understand where they're coming from, because the last thing the Army needs is someone putting down the Army profession. But am I putting down the Army profession? Who am I blaming for this? Who am I blaming? I'm blaming all of us. Because I'm contributing to this, because what do? Could I come here and say I couldn't do this by VTC? I'm pretty good on a screen, thank you. I could have done this VTC, okay? So I contribute to it. But the J7 contributes to it because they're forcing us to say it's mission critical for people to go to conferences. But the big army contributes to it because they have this doing all this dopey training, putting all these requirements on us. We're all responsible for it, okay? I'm not attacking the profession. I'm saying there's something in the profession that we need to fix. And if we're a profession, we'll fix it. That's phase 1, anger, denial, and no kidding. Okay, but phase 2, I started seeing movements in the bureaucracy. I started getting emails from the Army staff. One of the emails said, so exactly how did you calculate all those requirements? You know those 297 days? How did you calculate that? So I think they sort of thought I just made it up. Luckily, I had Excel spreadsheets, which is like this giant, if you laid them all out. So I sent them that, and I never heard from them again because I think I overwhelmed them. But then I got an email from a major at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, and he wanted to show me what he encountered. And he sent me an email saying, look, don't use my name on this, but I think the Army staff has read your study, but they don't understand it. And so what he showed me was here's an email, short suspense, no later than 5 March, identify mandatory training and non-training reporting policy requirements not listed in AR 3050-1 that leaders company grade. This is a quote out of the study, okay, about all the stuff that we put on people. Now, what do you notice about this email that this major wanted to point out? How long did you have to come up with every single requirement we put on company commanders? About 12 hours. How long did it take me with 10 War College students? About 6 months. And I remember in the study I wrote, if you ask a dumb question, what are you going to get back? A dumb answer. What kind of answers do you think you got back on this? A lot of dumb, which is code word for a lot of lies, okay? So this major sent this to me saying, I think they read it, but I don't think they get it, okay? Forcing us to come up with everything. Yes?
So would you agree with the fact that, it's everyone's problem, but it starts from the top? It starts from
You're looking for a solution.
Right.
Yeah. I'm policy, not execution. Sorry, so I can't do that. No. Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah. Because just like the problem starts with all of us, the solution starts with all of us. So we can't sit here and say, when Department of the Army straightens their act out, no. Because I'm busy filling out DTS. I'm busy doing trips. I'm busy doing OER support. You know what I'm saying? I need to start telling the truth. Mid-level people have to stop saying to people, hey, you can always tell me the truth. And then the first time someone tells you the truth, what do? You blow off on them. Yeah, they'll tell you the truth, right? They'll tell you what you want to hear from now on, okay? But we need Big Army to do their job too. So we need everyone. Sometimes I brief senior leaders. I briefed a bunch of brigade commanders, and they said, are you briefing cadets on this? I said, why? Why do you want to know that? Well, because I think that's where the solution's going to start. No, I don't think so. It's got to start with you. But I also brief cadets, and they say, do you brief general officers? Why do you want to know that? Because they're going to fix it. No, it starts with you. So we create the problem, but we all have to solve it. All right, stage 2, or phase 2, is the bureaucracy starts to bend. And then the Army sends out something called Executive Order 2-16, and that one says a 2-star can pull off a requirement. Okay, so human trafficking, you don't have to do it underneath me, says a 2-star. I was briefing this to a bunch of lieutenant colonels at Fort Benning. One raised his hand, he says, so what else you got? I said, what do you mean? I said, I affected policy. I wrote a report and I changed an Army-wide policy. I'm sending this to my mother, okay? This is big time. And he says, no, I mean, what else do you got? Did they do anything else? What was he was getting a little frustrated because he says, when do I get to pull a requirement off? I have to wait for a 2-star general to pull one off? Okay, so there's some frustration in there, and that bleeds into the next phase. But one last thing, I saw the bureaucracy move just a few weeks ago at the Association of the United States Army big convention they had in Washington, D.C. The Secretary of the Army, former Undersecretary of the Air Force, Eric Fanning, and our chief, General Milley, said it's not humanly doable to do everything that the Army tells them to do, that we force people to do. We need to get rid of requirements. Okay, so I heard them say, and they said we're going to get rid of all the requirements that don't have anything to do with fighting a war. And once that starts to happen, then there's room for optimism. Okay? The third phase, that's the second. The third phase is this group says we continue to live in this. When I finish this lecture, you're going to walk out those doors. What has changed? Hardly anything. And this group right here says let us work on it. Let us continue to work on it. But while they're working on it, we still have to live in it. We still have to live in it. Just ignore what that says, okay? Because I'm going to skip over it. All right? But I have to ask the question, where did all this come from? Where does this come from? How did this whole thing start? Well, it starts because back when I was your age, don't you hate it when people say that? When I was your age, back when we wanted to go on leave, if PFC Smith went on leave and didn't come back, we didn't go to the filing cabinet to look at their trips report. We didn't go to the filing cabinet to see if they turned in an LES that said they had enough leave. We didn't go and find out if their vehicle inspection said their car was perfectly fine. Where did we go? Where? We asked a leader. Where's Smith's vehicle? Did you inspect Smith's vehicle before he left? Did you ask him how he's traveling? You let him drive 10 hours to Indianapolis? Are you kidding? No. We didn't turn to paperwork to find out how things go with the soldiers. We turned to a leader. Society says, no, that 19-year-old should be responsible for themselves. That's fine, but guess what? In the military, we specialize in something called leadership. And we expect a leader to take care of that person, not paperwork. But somewhere along the line, we lost our trust in the leader. Somewhere along the line, we said that leader's human. Maybe we shouldn't trust the leaders because they let us down. And we said, what could we look at that will give us that wonderful glow of everything's okay, and we could sleep better at night? And so we replaced the leader with a checklist. And that checklist allows us to say the world is perfect. It's all green, everything's good to go, I can sleep. Knowing deep inside what? It's a lie. It's a lie. So when I go up to the Pentagon and I say all this information they send up to you, what do you guys do with it? Do you believe it? They say, no, we don't believe it. Why don't you believe it? We used to be down there, why would we ever believe it? Wait a minute, let me get this straight. We feed all this information to you that we know is not true. You know it's not true, but we all pretend it's true. That's lying to ourselves. Lying to ourselves. So what's your role? You have to realize that this is what happens in organizations that tend towards bureaucracy, not a profession. You have to fight to make it a profession. You have to lead truthfully. You have to watch that you're not being a person that makes people lie to you. When you get to be a leader, don't expect perfection because people aren't perfect. You have to realize that we're dealing with humans. So you got to take part in this whole thing. We're the cause of it, but we're also the solution. So how much honorarium did they pay me to come talk to you? Well, because you're a Department of Defense audience, I get nothing. So hopefully you got your money's worth. Any questions? Yes.
Sir, how much of like the burdens and stuff are a reaction to public outrage? Like, for example, whenever a dumb, young, enlisted person, let's say, takes a picture, posts on social media, the media gets a hold of it, now we have a CBT on social media etiquette. How much of the stuff we have to do is us not being willing to tell the public, hey, yeah, sometimes we make mistakes, we're not perfect, and you need to be okay with that?
There's some that's because of that, but the vast majority we create ourselves. We love to blame it on that stuff, but the vast majority is us. So if you wanted to know if the vehicles have been cleaned, you could have someone check all the vehicles and do a checklist. But what's an easier way? What's a better way to find out if the vehicles have been cleaned? Go check it. Go check it. Don't create system to do what a leader should be doing. Okay? Don't create a process to replace a leader. We specialize in leadership. Exercise it. Anything else? Because my hook is here.
Sorry, question.
Yes.
I know that you were specializing on the Army, but do you know anything about General Goldfeins' recent policy to reduce additional duties on airmen? Is that based on your study, or is it just...
I'll take credit for anything, but I don't know. Okay? I don't know. It's way beyond the Army, okay? The 4-star Air Force guy in European Command made this mandatory reading for everybody. So I don't want to, take credit for that, but in my next pay negotiation, I will. So thank you very much.